multiple screen types and screen sizes has never been an easy task. Device fragmentation, multiple browsers, different operating systems all work against the process by complicating your design and execution. Dreamweaver strives to enable you to handle the execution of responsive design by providing a framework for structuring content for different screens. Thankfully, it's easier than ever to structure responsive content in Dreamweaver. Here is a completed project, the Pluralist Outdoor website. This is where outdoor enthusiasts can browse for equipment and learn about tips, facts, and gear recommendations for their next adventure. The site adapts to devices as well as regular displays. The Pluralist site was developed in Dreamweaver, and I'm going to show you how we can create this type of responsive content for our site. We'll first look at how easy it is to create a fluid grid layout. Let's start by creating a new document. Here, you can define the type of grid template you want for each screen size, mobile, tablet, and desktop. The grid will be based on the number of columns you define. You can change the number of columns for each device. Notice that mobile is set to 4 columns, tablet is 8, and desktop is 12 columns. You can also change the percentage that the content will take up in the targeted viewport. So for desktop, we're telling the site to take up 90% of the available space within the viewport. We'll leave the defaults as they are and create a new document. The first thing we are asked to do is to save the CSS file. I'm saving this as layout 3 and putting it in the fluid grid folder. Next, we'll save the root file and name it index 3. Notice that there are 2 dependent files that will be added to our site. This is boilerplate.css and respond.min.js. The boilerplate is a set of styles to start from to make sure your pages look consistent across browsers and devices. The respond file is a small JavaScript library that helps add support for media queries in older browsers. The fluid grid layout depends on these additional files. So let's make sure they're in there. Notice that you can see these files in your CSS designer. We can now begin working on our file. These icons on the bottom allow us to view our content in 3 different layouts, one for mobile, one for tablets, and to view this better, I'm actually going to switch into design view. And the third one is for desktop. The gray columns you see in the background are the fluid grid layout guides. By default, we have one nested div element in our project. Let's go a little outside the lines here and start by duplicating the grid container. This allows us to place anything we want to have full bleed between the containers. Remember, the containers are designed to accommodate content that will fill a touch screen as well as regular display. So the containers provide space on the perimeter where scroll bars appear or where touch interactions may be difficult. Within the first container, let's add a header element and replace the default text. To do that, I'm going to delete the default div and go over to my structure component of the insert panel and choose a header, which is a nice HTML5 element. Once that's done, let's go ahead and put the content that we want to appear there. I'm going to name the site. And let's see. Let's add an unordered list after this for our nav along with 4 list items. Best way to do that, go ahead and click anywhere on the perimeter of that element you just created to put your context in the correct place. Choose unordered list. And Dreamweaver by default pops open your split view so that you can follow along in your design view to make sure that you're placing things in the right locations. The easiest way to do that, however, is just to click in the design view itself within the element. Now I can add list items, name them appropriately, and go back to my design view. Using the heads-up display, I can duplicate these elements to whatever extent I wish. I know I'm going to have 4 nav items, so I'm just going to create 4. I'm not going to rename all of these right now, but you can see that it's very easy to change text. Now, it is quite easy to add images as well. Between the grid containers, we'll add the hero waterfall image, which you'll see is going to always be at full bleed. So selecting the outer perimeter of the first grid container, I can just go to my common portion and choose image. I'll navigate to my hero waterfall image and pop that in there. Now you can see that even though the grid containers only take up 90% of the visible space, the image itself is at full bleed. Below the image, let's create an array of navigation buttons. I am creating a product section element now. So again, we're going to delete the default div that's there and use something that's a little bit more HTML5 compliant. Let's add a section and name it appropriately as well. So we have evolved the Fluid Grid layout framework so that you can use the Insert panel to add elements to the Fluid Grid, as you've seen. Now you can employ HTML5 elements. In the Insert section dialog, you used to only be able to add an ID, but now you can also assign a reusable class to the element. This allows multiple elements to use the same class for styling. Making a change to a style property in the class changes all the elements in that group that would use the same class attribute. So we could use one style for all our product buttons. Let's go ahead and insert this one. And you can see that it's taking up the full span of the design surface. Let's adjust the size so that this element only takes up 2 columns. Now when I duplicate the product element, the new element appears below the first. I'm using the arrow icon to move the second product element to the right of the first one. Now, when I duplicate the product element, Dreamweaver correctly places the new copy to the right side of the original. Let's go ahead and make 6 of these total. Because the Fluid Grid framework adds spacing to the left and right by default, I can eliminate this spacing from my desktop view by clicking in the heads-up display again to reduce the margin to 0. So now I have all 6 elements in line. Notice how the product navigation elements change between device views. In tablet and mobile, they still run the full span of the grid. But in desktop, we've assigned the changes only for that media query. Now in the tablet size, I may not want to show all of the navigation elements. I can easily hide a few of these by selecting the Hide Element icon. Notice that the hidden navigation elements still appear in other screen sizes, even though they no longer appear in tablet view. So switching to mobile, you can still see I have all 6 elements, and the same is true for the desktop. So you have just seen how easy it is to create a Fluid Grid layout and add elements to it. Designing and building for multiple screens has become much easier and faster. Now let's look at the starter file for the Pluralist Outdoor website. This has most of the content for the site already built out. This is the home page in Design View. This shows the position of the items in the web page and allows you to edit them in the Design View, but it does not display your content as a browser would. Live View renders the web page as if it were in a browser. This saves time from having to preview each change. This is the home page layout as if it were on a desktop. Because this content is using the Fluid Grid layout, there are media queries defined to resize and reflow the content based on the screen size. Notice that you can use the media queries in the CSS Designer in tandem with the defined screen sizes below the design surface. In the tablet size, you'll note that the top navigation has moved under the logo and the category buttons have disappeared. In the mobile size, the top navigation has disappeared entirely. You can view it by expanding the menu dropdown to the right of the logo. Going back to the desktop view, all the category links are using the same parent class in the section tag. When I select one of the links, the heads-up display appears. If I change a property in the parent class, it will affect all the category links. I'm using the right handle to resize this element from a 2-column width to a 1-column width in our Fluid Grid layout. Notice all of the category links are now resized. Let's change that back. Now let's add another element to complete our row of navigation links. I'm duplicating the jackets category link. There used to be many ways to update CSS definitions. Now there's just one location, the CSS Designer panel, to update the CSS styles for your content. Notice there are 4 sections in the CSS Designer panel. The Sources section lists all of your CSS files included in your project. The @Media section lists the media queries that have been defined for your project. By selecting each of these definitions, you can view your project in live view and see how they will look in the browser. The Selectors section lists all of your CSS definitions. And the Properties section shows the styles and properties which have been applied to the elements in your content. So, with the new Jackets element selected, you can see the computed properties for its class in the CSS Designer panel. The computed selector allows you to see the style properties for an element without having to know the exact selector name. Let's change the background color to red. Now you can see the background color changes for the two jacket links, but not for the other two category links. This is because the new link icons share the same subclass property. The category links appear to be images that were created using Photoshop, but if I change the border radius property to 0 for all corners, you can see that these are really just square vector graphics that have been styled to have rounded corners. I'm setting all 4 corners back to a border radius of 60 pixels for the tablet view. I can also change each corner individually. Let's change the top left corner. Notice that when I set it to 0, we create a nice droplet effect for each of the link icons, which complements the waterfall image above. Now let's change the hover state of the background image for the category link. In this dialog, we have many options for styling the gradient. I'm setting the RGBA value for the gradient by popping open the tool and choosing a color that I like. Now you can see the gradient on the background image as I hover over the jacket category links. The best way to showcase this is to actually switch off the fluid grid layouts, and now you can see this gradient effect over the link. We have seen how designing for multiple screen sizes can be simplified with the enhanced fluid grid layout. With Dreamweaver, you can visually control the page layout for each screen size. We have also seen how enabling a class-based workflow gives you more control over shared properties and behaviors in your fluid grid layout framework. Be sure to check out our other videos for Dreamweaver's newest features, and thanks again for watching. I'm Alejandro.